This is Hardball with Chris Mathews, January 7th, 2019.
From the president that he would like to not only close government, build a wall, but also abolish Congress. So the only voice that mattered was his own.
I'm joined right now by Ted Lieu, Democratic Congressman from California. Shannon Pettypiece, White House correspondent for Bloomberg. John Brabender, a Republican strategist. Let's hear from the congressman first. As a lawmaker, sir, what do you make of the possibilities that perhaps like John Kennedy in the Cuban Missile Crisis, this president is going to sit there in the Oval Office tomorrow night reading a script that calls for him to declare a national emergency, perhaps then shifting billions of dollars from the defense fund to the wall? What do you make of that constitutionally, sir?
Thank you, Chris, for your question. Let me first say my heart goes out to the victims of the tragic mass shooting in my hometown of Torrance this weekend. Now, specifically on your question, I served in the military on active duty. I was a JAG. I've studied this issue, and it is my opinion that it would be illegal for the president to use the military to go build a wall simply by declaring a national emergency. It would violate the Posse Comitatus Act. The military members would be following an illegal order, subjecting them to being at risk of violating federal crime. This is a very big deal. I hope the president does not declare a national emergency to build a wall.
Looking at his impulsive manner of governing, looking at the way he governs from the gut and plays to his choir, have you any confidence he won't do it? Because he fired his attorney general, he fires his defense secretary, he fires his chief of staff. Anyone that gets in his way and says, you can't do this, Mr. President, he gets rid of. You say he can't do it. What about he has nobody? Who in the White House? Mattis is gone. Mad Dog's gone. Nobody can stop him. His guy, McGahn, is gone. His attorney, his White House attorney, who used to say no to him once in a while, he's gone. Is this going to go to the courts? He declares a national emergency, directs the shift of billions of dollars to the wall, and then what happens under our Constitution, sir?
Our framers were very wise, and they created 3 branches of government. I'm convinced the courts will stop the president if he were to declare a national emergency to build a wall. The framers of the Constitution gave Congress, specifically the House of Representatives, the power of the purse. The president can't go around that power simply by making up a national emergency and appropriating funds that Congress specifically did not authorize. And this national emergency is completely made up. If you look at the facts, violent crime is down across the United States, property crime is down, immigrants commit less crime, and border crossings are down. The president's going to lose in court.
Congressman, one last question. I mean, this is cruel, but have you looked at the makeup of the United States Supreme Court lately? And what gives you confidence among those 9 people that the 5 of them won't do what they've been doing for years, ever since the Gore fight back in 2000 when they gave the election to W? What gives you any confidence they won't just do what this president tells them to do and authorize that shift of money from the Defense Department to the wall?
I believe this would be a step too far even for conservative jurists on the Supreme Court. Again, the House of Representatives alone has the power of the purse. The president can't go around that simply by making up this national emergency. I think the courts would strike it down regardless of whether they're conservative or liberal.
Okay, let me go to Shannon on this first. Shannon, you've been talking about this, reporting on this. It does seem to me he's asking for national time tomorrow night. You don't get prime time money, or time, it's money really, from the networks or broadcast networks unless you got news to announce. He's not going to go out there and just beat the drum on the war threat, the wall threat. He's going to have to come out with news, and I think you're right. I think what we have been talking about is he's going to go with a national emergency and say, I wanted to do it a different way, but Nancy Pelosi won't let me. I'm doing it this way.
Yeah, they're doubling down on their strategy here. They see this as a winning political hand. They see that immigration is the #1 issue among Republican voters, including the president's base. They are feeling no political pressure. So go out there on prime time, declare a national emergency, go visit the border, play this up as hard as you can because they do not see the political consequences from it yet. The president believes very much that the majority of federal workers who are affected by this are Democrats in D.C. and Maryland.
If he goes to the national emergency route tomorrow night and shifts the funds, doesn't that end the standoff about the government staying open or not?
I mean, we really have no idea because we're kind of in uncharted territory here. Yeah. It's possible he could declare a national emergency and shift money for things other than a wall, things to help with medical treatment or temporary housing, but to use it as a way to elevate the platform and tell people there's this emergency at the border and get people fired up about this issue.
Let's get back to the facts. about the reality here and about whether there are many terrorists that cross the border or not. I mean, there's always an ethnic issue about people coming across from Mexico and Latin America. We know all the politics about that, especially in states where that does offend people or concern them. White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders was challenged yesterday when she said that thousands of terrorists have entered the country through the southern border. Let's watch that.
We know that roughly nearly 4,000 known or suspected terrorists come into our country illegally. And we know that our most vulnerable point of entry is at our southern border.
I know this statistic. I didn't know if you were going to use it, but I studied up on this. Do you know where those 4,000 people come, or where they're captured? Airports.
Not always, but certainly a large number.
The State Department says there hasn't been any terrorists that they found coming across the southern border.
It's by air, it's by land, and it's by sea. It's all of the above.
They're not coming across the southern border, Sarah. They're coming and they're being stopped at airports.
In a number of ways. There's certainly, I'm not disagreeing with you that they're coming through airports.
I'm not disagreeing after just saying they're coming across the border. As a follow-up, NBC News has reported today that U.S. Customs and Border Protection encountered only 6 immigrants on the U.S.-Mexican border in the first half of the last fiscal year whose names are on a federal government list as known or suspected terrorists. Just 6. That's according to data provided to Congress last May. John Brainbender, I assume that the reason he keeps calling about terrorists, because then he can say to people, well, they're not prejudiced against Hispanics, they're just worried about terrorists. But there is no terrorist threat from the southern border.
Well,
how can your administration?
First of all, there's multiple problems with the southern border.
Well, what about
terrorists? Is one. I don't care.
Who says it's
one thing we learned on 9/11, even if it's a handful of terrorists, we don't want to be in a situation say, why didn't we do something about that? So whether it's 1,000, whether it's 500,
the wall's going to keep out terrorists.
Well, that's number one.
No, really, honestly, John Brainbender, you're smart. Are you telling me
if we're
that
making
a
it
wall
more
would
difficult?
keep out
Let's add some of the other things the president is saying.
The desert if they're going
Last year in America, 100,000 Americans were rushed to the ER because of heroin. 3/4 of the heroin comes into this country from the southern border. There's 20,000 children in Central America and Mexico that are being pushed to America that are part of sex trafficking. We have that problem. And then you talk about the gangs. Go to Long Island. Talk about the children that were killed in Long Island by gangs that are coming here. And you understand that we do have an emergency. We have American lives. And everybody forgets, they're saying, oh, well, the president shouldn't call this, couldn't get this 5.7 million or billion. Why was it all right for the Obama administration to just randomly give 1.7 billion to the Iranians in cash for basically a ransom, and nobody thought on the left anything of that.
Congressman Lieu, this is all over the place, but the question of a national emergency is not something to be argued about. There is either an emergency or it is not. Is it appropriate for the president to be talking in such language?
Absolutely not. There is a crisis, though, in healthcare and infrastructure. That's what Democrats want to work on. Instead, we're having this big distraction of this manufactured crisis that doesn't exist at the southern border. Again, if you look at the facts, crime is down, both violent and property crime. Immigrants, both documented and undocumented, commit less crime. And Democrats support border security. We just don't support an inefficient and wasteful 4th century wall. So we can prevent a lot of these things from happening at the southern border with much more efficient mechanisms. That's why we're having this argument, because Trump wants his vanity wall.
Well, Shannon, back to you in the news here, because it seems to be the news, and I've been away a couple of weeks, but the big news to me is this has reached a head. Nancy Pelosi is not somebody to be played with. She's got a mandate from the voters. This past November, she has a whole new crop of women, a lot of young women, a lot of people on the left, a lot of people who did not come into Congress to play ball with Donald Trump.
Well,
they don't want deals.
I don't think this is coming to a head. I mean, I think this just got started a couple days ago, and it's not come to a head because neither side is feeling any political pressure.
Well, that's why is Trump going to this national television address tomorrow night?
To speak to his base, to speak to Republicans. I mean, I think John's point is sort of you can argue with it or not, but the Republicans perceive immigration as a major issue. You can argue whether or not it should be perceived as a major issue, but they feel it is. So while most of the Americans will probably tune out a national address from the president in prime time, you speak to Republicans who see the president.
Okay, we only have a minute. I want to put a question to both of you. Do you think the president thinks he can win a war of attrition? Just wait it out. I don't think so. This thing about the garbage piling up and the paychecks not being delivered and people not getting their tax returns, they're not getting their returns. This thing is going to get worse and worse for the president. Isn't it smarter for him to move now and just break this thing open with a national emergency declaration? It seems like that's what he's thinking.
Yeah, possibly.
Can't win a war of attrition.
Yeah, but then it just gets kicked into court. I mean, who knows what happens then?
John, can he
There's
win
no downside.
Can he win a long-term shutdown? Can he win a
Well,
long-term
he's
shutdown?
taking a good step tomorrow. He knows he has a bigger megaphone to the national people than Nancy Pelosi does. He's going to use that to redefine and not talk about a wall, but talk about national security and the importance of keeping America
What's he
safe.
then do? He can't just talk.
What he's going to do is he's going to lay out the case of why there is a national problem, emergency, and say, I don't want to start there, but the Democrats don't care about your security. If they refuse to do something about protecting your family, I will.
Congressman, last word to you. And the question, what will be the serve rebuttal? What will be the ultimate response tomorrow night at 9:20 or so after the president has spoken? It'll be on this network. What will the Congress do if the president says, I'm shifting a couple $1 billion from money spent to defend this country to build a wall? What will the Congress do? Or just wait for the courts?
I believe the House of Representatives would sue. In addition, what we have here is a House of Representatives passing two versions to reopen government in terms of bills to the U.S. Senate. One last month that had wall funding, one last week that did not have wall funding. So really you have a Republican-controlled Senate that is not acting on either of these packages, and it's really Republican senators that are just as at fault as the president is in having this unnecessary shutdown that's harming a lot of Americans.
For a president to arbitrarily take billions of dollars, which has been earmarked for national defense, and shift it over to a wall, is that an impeachable offense? Impeachable offense. Would that be an article?
Yeah. It could be, and the Supreme Court in 1953 struck down President Truman's national emergency where he tried to seize or steal mills, saying you can't just make up a national emergency and do something that you couldn't do normally. And what we're going to see tomorrow is the president maybe trying to get a face-saving way out so you can throw this into the courts. But if he wants to reopen government, that's great. And if he wants to reopen government and then declare a national emergency and then we have the courts battle it out, that's something I can live with, because we shouldn't be harming all these Americans as well as our national parks and people who are at risk of losing their homes.
You said it
and
couldn't
not
be
getting tax
impeachable.
refunds.
What would be the condition for it being impeachable? What would make it impeachable?
That if his advisors told him this is illegal and he went ahead and did it, and then put our military personnel at risk of following an illegal order and committing federal crimes, that's a pretty significant obligation of the president to protect our military folks as well.
Thank you so much. U.S. Congressman Ted Lieu of California, Shannon Pennypiece of Bloomberg, and John Brabender of the Republican Party. Coming up, with President Trump stuck between Pelosi and Limbaugh, the cracks within the Republican